Welcome to the trap. All right, so right quick, let's talk about it, man. Joe Biden just released something, right? Just said this infrastructure deal, right? And in the deal, right? So all together, they're going to spend $579 billion, right? $579 billion on infrastructure. Now, if we look back to when Biden first got in office, right? If we look back to when Biden first got in office, one of the things Trap said is this. If we look at the pedigree of Democrats and Republicans, we found out that Democrats spend more money on two things. One is infrastructure, two is aerial space and defense. And, right, if we pay attention to that, we said two things. I said this in the beginning. I said, listen, Democrats spend money on two things, infrastructure and aerial space, which is defense, right? And so far, they have not let us down, right? So far, we've seen aerial space run and we've seen infrastructure just get more plays going in, right? So what have we seen? So they said $579 billion deal, $312 billion will be in transportation. So that means transports, that means trains, planes, railroads, trucking, all of this is going to get a lot of play, right? And then they said they're going to spend another $266 billion in other infrastructure, right? So when we talk about infrastructure, let's talk about infrastructure, right? Do we know and understand what infrastructure is, right? So infrastructure is in banking, infrastructure is in churches, infrastructure isn't any of that. Infrastructure deals with the things that we need. Yep. So we're looking at the Dow can be a great component of it, right? So infrastructure, we're talking about a few things. We're talking about heavy construction. We're talking about airports, right? We're talking about trucking. We're talking about transportation, right? But we're also talking about broadband, which is sound like internet infrastructure. We can talk about data centers. That is part of the infrastructure. Highways, that is part of the infrastructure. Heavy equipment, that is part of infrastructure, right? And so we break infrastructure down in a few ways. We think about infrastructure, we'll talk about three things, right? We'll talk about transport. So when we talk about transport, we talk about airports, we talk about railroads, we talk about toll roads, and we talk about ports, right? So when we talk about ports, we're talking about when the ship docks, that is the port where it's coming to get things from, right? Back and forth, right? Next, we're going to talk about the next thing is commodity. We're talking about transport and process. Right? The process. We're talking about stored commodities. We're talking about water. We're talking about oil, natural gas, and electricity. Everybody with me right now say we trap it. And the third one we'll talk about is data networks. We're talking about data centers. We're talking about broadband. This is also infrastructure. Now, one of the things we heard about inside of the deal that Joe Biden said was, he said, listen, and this was important for us. He broke down this. He said, we're going to break it down also into physical infrastructure, which is planes, trains, roads, bridges, and broadband. We talked about that, right? But then he said something that was real important. He said, we are 100% going to replace lead water pipes. Why is that important? It is important because we already understood that they were having water shortages, right? They were having clean water shortages. So what that's going to do is two things. That means we'll see opportunities in heavy equipment that's going to deal with pipelines. So any company that's dealing with pipelines may be a play for us. Any company that's dealing with pipelines, the structure of pipelines, creating pipelines, this will be a play for us, right? And you got to think about it, right? So you got to think about it. So normally, we've been seeing most presidents get what? A double term. So if we saying if this is going to be Joe Biden's game plan, then we know these plays with infrastructure can be a play for us for the next 4 years, right? I want y'all to think about that. So now, right now you think about this. If this is Joe Biden's play right here, right? If this is what he's going with, he's saying, yo, we're going to designate $579 billion to infrastructure. And then over the next 9 years, we're going to spend $1 trillion. So let's put that into play, right? $579 billion. And then over the next 9 years, we're going to spend $1 trillion on infrastructure, right? So that's good. So that tells us what? That tells us we can make plays right now that can at least be 4-year plays. we're going to look at these things, right? So we'll say, okay, cool. If they're going to spend $1 trillion in 9 years, right? If they're going to spend $1 million in 9 years on $1 trillion in 9 years, and we know they're going to dedicate to replacing lead piping, right? PAVE is definitely a good ETF for infrastructure. I talked to the trappers about that. The minute Joe Biden got into office, I said, listen, this is an ETF that you can look at, PAVE. The ones who got into that have done well. They had the one who got into that, the ones who got into PAVE and Trappers Anonymous, they have been doing pretty well. One of the things I do in Trappers Anonymous, we have a thing called ETF Thursdays. Trappers Anonymous is great for anybody who's looking for community and who's looking for more access, right? All right, so let's dig into it, right? So also a good play for us when we're looking at infrastructure is basic materials, right? This is not a beautiful sector, right? This is a sector that some people kind of scared of. They kind of scared. They try to shy away from it. Why do people shy away from basic materials? Is because it doesn't get talked about too much on TV. Basic materials is also great, right? It isn't glamorous. So one of the things I like to talk about, one of the things that I love to do, right, is invest in boring businesses, right? Invest in boring businesses. Why do we invest in boring businesses? Is because boring businesses tend to perform extremely well. Right, we've been in Fastenal, we've been in United Rentals, and they have done us extremely well because they haven't been all over the news, and they've been performing extremely well for myself and the trappers. We've been in United Rentals for a long time. We're up over 100% easy, right? All right, boring businesses are great. Why? Because you get them before the media and the news get into them, and then they tend to drive them, a different type of way, right? And the reason why we love boring business because this is organic growth into these businesses, right? So one of the ones that I did like was Vulcan Materials, ticker symbol VMC, is kind of up about 50% on the year. Great business to be in, right? But here's the thing. Here's a sleeper business that a lot of people don't understand about is ticker symbol JBT. Now, when we think about, and I'm going to tell you why I'm looking at this business, right? So when we think about physical infrastructure, right? When we think about transport, we think about airplanes, right? Right? We think about airplanes, JBT. We think about airplanes. We think about railroads. We think about toll roads. We think about these things, right? But here's the dope part. The reason why I love JBT and the reason why I'm looking into it way before this because I just understand infrastructure. They manufacture food tech systems. They prepare food and ready-to-eat meals, right? But here's the thing. 30% of their revenue come from airports because they help with airport equipment, including jetways, cargo loading, aircraft towing, and aircraft ground power, right? So now you think about the foods that's getting prepared for the airport. We think about towing airplanes back and forth. When you think about, things that come about with putting the craft together, JBT can be a great company that will benefit from infrastructure, right? And I'm not telling nobody to get into this, right? I'm not telling no one to get into this. I'm just saying things. There are different ways we can get into the game without actually having to be here. We just analyze different ways where businesses can be a part of the ecosystem, right? So let's say you invested in Boeing, right? And Boeing is the producer of the plane. Well, while they're the producer of the plane, well, also when you're getting on the airplane, you know one thing, luggage and stuff got to be sent to the airplane. You know that, food got to be presented to the airplane. Planes got to be towed back and forth. So JBT actually gets 30% of their revenue from helping airplanes out. So that can be something great for us to play when we think about infrastructure, right? Also, we can look at too is charging points, right? These are becoming great for, this has now become a play on infrastructure, right? The reason why this has become a play on infrastructure is because we know that EV is becoming a part of the way the world is going. right? Yep, airport airlines use a ton of fuel, right? So now we can look at that like fueling stations for airports. This can be another play for us, right? Another thing we could do is we think about charging points, because we see that this will become a great part of the way we move around in the world, right? The way we move around in the world, cars and everything will become we'll need charging points, charging stations will definitely be a part of infrastructure, because we, no matter how, whether we like it or not, we understand that electronic vehicles is the future. There's no way around it, right? And so another thing we look at, when we look at electric fuels, we look at energy, basic materials, we also look at energy. Why energy? So energy took a beating last year, right? But as of now, no, not really, not in this section. When we look at the market, energy is the leading sector. Energy is up about 50%. It's leading the S&P right now, right? Energy is up, right? And so we think about energy is up right now about 50% compared to the S&P being up only 13%. Now, 13% is not bad at all, but again, our energy is up 50%, right? And so that's good. So when we talk about the energy sector, we talk about XLE. Now, here's something we can look at somebody like ExxonMobil, who took a beating last year, now it's up 53%, right? And so where I see growth at myself is in two places, fintech, but we're not talking about that, but renewable energy. Like I was talking about that for a minute, like renewable energy. We talked to the trappers about getting in Sunrun. We talked about getting the ETF attain. I don't like Sasol. I worked for Sasol. They got a lot going on. They're not a bad business, but the growth, they need this. Sasol needs this huge project to finish. They're based out of South Africa. It's not that I don't like them. I need to see this project in Lake Charles get finished, right? It's a huge company, don't get me wrong, and they are part of the future. What Sasol is doing is they're finding a way to convert coal into clean energy. So they do have a chance, right? They can do something, but it's gonna take a longer than what I would, and I see there's just better plays. Not saying it's a bad investment, but I see that there may be some better plays. Again, because I worked at Sasol, so I know a lot about that business myself, right? But I want us to understand that. Another thing we can look at is Eaton, right? Eaton, ETN, right? It's a power management business, right? And they deal with solar wind farms, things like that, right? The company has literally paid a dividend since 1923, consistently paid a dividend to all businesses, to all their shareholders, and increased it since 1963. So if you're with me right now, we trapping, man, just let me know we trapping, man, because the goal is to just help us make plays in this situation, right? And so we can truly understand how to just play the game, right? And that's all it's about. It's about understanding the news. It's about understanding the news and learning how to exactly play the game that's going on. And so also we can look at these different plays. So now we're looking at, okay, cool. These infrastructure plays will be boring plays. These infrastructure plays won't be plays that will just run up right now, but you'll see those gradual increases, right? And so one of the things that the news and the media typically does is it makes us throw away the game plan, right? And that's one of the things we don't want to do, right? Yes, I am. We don't want to just throw away the game plan. We want to watch those businesses grow over time, right? So let's think about it, right? If you invest in a business and you at least put a 4 or 5 year outlet plan on it, right? Right? If you just put a 4 or 5 year outline on, okay, cool, Biden got in office now, let me give myself a 4-year plan, right? Let me give myself a 4-year plan, right? So now I can invest in these businesses and watch them grow for the next 4 years. And then we just recalibrate. So when you're looking at your companies, you got to recalibrate it. It's simple. It's what we doing. You recalibrate it. It's different because that's a fact. Once you had a good y'all know how we get down over here, man. I'm just drinking water, y'all. This ain't nothing. It's some of the best water I ever had. I'm out here in Kenya. Some of the best water I ever had. You got to You got to. So let's talk about, so we talking about these companies, we talking about how do we use this, right? Let's see where Donnie at. So we're talking about how to use these companies. So if we're looking at it from the component of, yo, we can have a full year run, right? We can have a full year run. We can recalibrate it after this if we are here, right? If we here, right? If we looking at, okay, now we can set our portfolio like, yo, this is my infrastructure play because I know Biden is in office. Right, these are some of my infrastructure plays. Yes, Wi-Fi is good for sure, and that can be the infrastructure plays for us. So now let's dig a little deep. So we think about infrastructure, right? We can't think infrastructure if we're not thinking what? Asphalt, concrete, right? And so what do we look at for those plays? We look at Caterpillar, right? We're looking at John Deere, right? We understand that, right? And so one of the other things we can look at too, and if we're thinking about that, so one of the things, since I'm being over here, one of the things I knew where the economy was coming up was because I saw a lot of road work getting done. That's infrastructure. So when I talked to the people in Kenya, I said when I went sat with the guys at the stock market, yep, Martin Marietta, that's a good one. I think the ticker symbol is MLM. I think the ticker symbol is MLM, right? Great business, great way to look at that, right? So when we're looking at infrastructure, we can't talk about infrastructure without talking about Caterpillar, right? It's the epitome of infrastructure, right? It's the biggest brand you could think of when it comes to that, right? When you see those asphalt pavers, those are great plays. But again, they're long, we're looking at 4 years. Right, we're saying, okay, how can we benefit from these for the next 4 years, right? And if we know, again, Joe Biden says within the next 9 years, we'll spend what? $1 trillion, right? And so we look at that. Also, we can look at some other plays that we can look at. We can go a little deeper into some plays. We can go into, we talked about Fastenal. We talked about United Rentals. Right, but then let's get a little deeper. We can get into the basic materials. So let's go a little deeper, like with BHP Group, right? The largest iron miner, right? Iron, right? Or we can get into Vale, VALE, which is the largest nickel miner. And then we just talking about basic materials right here, right? And if we dig in for infrastructure, all of these can be plays for us. I'm not really heavy on the U.S. steel simply because ticker symbol X, right? I'm not really heavy on the U.S. steel because they have been performing bad. The reason why is because the United States have been getting a lot of steel from China, right? Now, as an iron worker, as a former iron worker, we hate steel that comes from China. You're like, yo, this steel come from China. We don't want it, right? And it was because we're having a hard time getting steel from the U.S., right? It was hard getting steel from the U.S., and a lot of U.S. places were getting steel from China. Now, if we can see that switch, right? If we can see that switch to having more steel companies here, then we're looking at a different ball game. But I remember as an iron worker, that was one of the things we didn't like. We weren't getting a lot of U.S. steel, and we were kind of mad about that. We were like, yo, like, nah, we had an issue with that all the time, right? And so that was something like we kind of was like, yeah, we were kind of mad about not getting steel from here. Now, so one of the things we can do also infrastructure. We talk about broadband. We can also talk about communications as a heavy infrastructure play, right? And so largest probably on American company. Yep, Cargill. Yep, know about that. Yep. Another play that is heavy for us. Remember when we talked about data, we talked about network, we talked about data centers, we talked about networks. Another play, no, robotics and biotechnology. No, we're talking about infrastructure. That don't have nothing to do with infrastructure, right? That don't have nothing to do with infrastructure. I'm not really heavy on the steel plays. When we're looking at, even though it is an infrastructure play, I'm not heavy on them simply because I know the building will be great. But bingo, somebody got me. I was about to go to official quant. That was my next thing. We can get into cell phone towers, right? Crown Castle, American Tower, great plays, The thing about both of those are they do carry a lot of debt, but what I do love about them is they've turned their towers into like fourplexes, into like duplexes in multiple units. Because what they've done is, instead of having one company on a cell tower, they've gotten smart. What they started doing was saying, we'll put multiple companies on one tower. Brilliant play. Right? No, Qualcomm. No. We talking about infrastructure plays. And so one of the things you got to start learning is, what is infrastructure? Right? You got to understand what infrastructure is. Right? A lot of times we just yelling at our company like, no, we're talking about infrastructure plays here. Right? Nah. We talk about infrastructure. Infrastructure. Right? And so when we talk about infrastructure, we talk about a few things. We talk about transport, commodities, and data. Right? But it can go into different ways, right? We can go into physical infrastructure, which can run under planes, trains, roads, bridges, broadband, things like that, right? We can get into basic materials, right? Those are infrastructure plays, right? Those are infrastructure plays. That's what we're looking at, and that's how we grow the business. That's how we grow. Remember, we talked about this in the business, so we talk about planes, we can talk about. Don't sleep on the idea that Boeing was a great business. We can talk about Boeing. We can talk about Lockheed Martin, right? Lockheed Martin, which is a great company, great dividend, is kind of high. CrowdStrike is cybersecurity. It is an infrastructure, right? So what I want us to do is, this shows that a lot of us really need to get into something bigger. Like, we got to stop just guessing. I want us to stop guessing. That's one of the things that's going to hinder our growth in being great investors. Northern Grooming, infrastructure, 100%, right? CSX, infrastructure, right? The Granger, borderline, great area-ish, right? Right, Defend would be a good play for that, right? Public storage, concrete garage doors, public storage, right? Palantir is not into infrastructure. We're talking infrastructure here, y'all. Right? Stop just yelling stuff out, yo. Right? So we got to start understanding how that dynamic works for us. But also, don't run away from energy. Solar energy could be a great play for us, right? I definitely don't like CenturyLink. It was a horrible business. I'll talk about that another time. But I wanted us to talk about this today because Joe Biden just came up and he said about that, and I just wanted to give us some plays that we could get in, that we can research, that we can study, so that we can move forward, right? Because we understand that there's always going to be a shift happening. There's always going to be something going on that we can capitalize on, and that's how we win at this game. Understanding what's going on, right? Understand what's going on, and so we can pivot. Another play that we can make is in water, right? So American Water Company could be a great play. American States Water could be a good place, so we can go with AWK, AWR, California Water Services, CWT. These are great plays for us as well. Yes, VNQ is a real estate investment trust, ETF, which, it's cool. So we can definitely make those plays. And so that's when we talk about infrastructure, that's the kind of ways we can go at playing this game. Yep, PHO for sure is it water ETF, right? That's what we're talking about in the class, the NVIDIA stock split, right? And so those are ways that we can play this game, y'all. So I hope y'all really got a lot out of this conversation we had, right? The goal was, again, to just get us to tap in, give us some information. Don't overwhelm yourself with the information. Take it one day at a time. Take it one class, one session at a time. One of the things I want us all to understand too is, like, the market is not going nowhere. And so once we understand that the market is not going nowhere, we don't have to be in a rush. One of the things that hinders a lot of people is they feel like they behind, and you're not behind, right? You're not behind, right? You're right where you're supposed to be. The thing about past performance, it's in the past. We can move forward. There's always going to be an event happen, right? There's always going to be an event that's going to take place to put us in position to win. The market will always reward patience. The market will always reward patience. And I want us to understand that. So man, I hope y'all got a lot out of this tonight. I hope I gave y'all some game. I hope I gave y'all something to live off. I hope I gave y'all a lot of food. I hope y'all took y'all to the lake. But also here's something too. Beyond Meat, watch out for that play. I know it's not an infrastructure play, but watch out for that play. They're spreading. They'll be in Sprouts. They'll be in Walmart. They'll be in Target. I think Beyond Meat, I think I got into it around $66. Be mindful of that play. You may be able to find it and get it at a discount price coming soon. It has been falling for the last day or two. You can get it if you can get it. It's a good play. They're also going to be at Fridays, Carl's Jr., Del Taco. So just be mindful that year to date is up about 15%. I actually am a fan of Beyond Meat. I think it has a lot of growth. Still has a time before it will be profitable. But understanding that people are in the way of going meatless. People are kind of getting away from eating meat. Not saying that it's better for you, because Beyond Meat isn't really better for you. It isn't really better for you. But for people who want to get off meat and who's not just in the vegan or vegetarian space, like, yo, I just want to get off this meat thing right quick, they're going to travel to that. And Beyond Meat is spreading their wings so many different ways. They spreading their wings. So that's going to be good. Right now, the bank sector, the bank is flourishing. One of the things I told us, one of the things I said when the pandemic first started, I said, we're going to know when we're coming out of this if we just follow the banks. If we follow the banks, which is why we got in JP Morgan at a low price. I think we got into JP Morgan at $89. We got into Goldman Sachs at $150, right? Those are my two favorite banking plays. Banks are thriving right now. Banks are thriving right now, right? Banks are thriving right now. Why are banks thriving right now? Because people are getting out more. People are doing more things. People are spending more, right? Banks are thriving right now, and the banks are telling us what's going on. And once we understand those things, right, and it's something that JP need a pullback. I'm not mad, right? And so these are some of the plays we can make, like, and it's not that, and I like to tell people that, like, it's not that I know more than you. I just study the game. Because if you've seen it once and you just stay in it, you'll see it again. Just like every day, you know the sun is going to come up, and then every night, you know the sun is going to go down. So you can almost have your mind clocked on it, right? But Buffett and Gates both dump their bank stocks. This is why you need to be your own individual investor, because you can't do what Buffett and Bill Gates do. They're investing with a whole different type of mind frame than you. And that's one of the things I tell people often about investing. Like, you don't have to follow Warren Buffett. You don't have, XLF been printing money for me since December, for sure, Queen. You've been rocking me a long time, so I want to tell you I appreciate that, right? But one of the things I said a long time ago, like, I don't base my investments off Warren Buffett. Why? Because Warren Buffett is investing with $100 and something billion. Yes, $200 billion in Berkshire Hathaway sitting on the side, right? He's moving in a different way than me, right? Bill Gates, they move in a different way than me. They have so much money, they can only do certain things at a certain time, right? They can't even invest in some of the stocks that you can invest in because they have too much money. Exactly. You have to get your investing identity. I know my investing identity, and my investing identity has nothing to do with Warren Buffett. Have I learned a lot from Warren Buffett? Hell yeah. Have I learned a lot from him? Hell yeah. But I can't invest the way he invests because he moves different, right? And so you have to think the same way. You can't base your moves off of Warren Buffett. So right now, today, just a recap, man, we talked about infrastructure. So one of the things, again, so we talked about a few things, man. We talked about infrastructure stocks, how we can move based on what we saw Joe Biden do. So with that being said, man, I hope I hope I dropped some game. I hope I gave y'all some game. I hope you all are able to use some of that. With that being said, man, we gone. I appreciate y'all. Y'all have a good night, man. It's your boy, the Wall Street Travel. Wall Street looks like us now. You already know, man. I'm out.